Hi everyone, it's Andy from Hobby Headquarters. Today we're going to be doing part 2 of building Tamiya's brand new 1/16 scale Panzerjäger Jagdpanther. This was originally based on their 1/16 scale RC kit that came out not too long ago, and Tamiya's come up with a display model for us. So anyone wanting a really cool big piece, this is it for you right here. Now, part 1 of the video was all of the construction, doing all the individual torsion bars, all the metal parts, putting that together. Part 2 of this video is going to be a more in-depth detailing of painting and weathering and getting it to look like, you know, a really beat up, war-torn vehicle. So let's get started on it. Now that we're getting to the painting and weathering portion of the build, what I thought I would do is do a little bit some more detailed type looks at certain items on the vehicle, because the vehicle itself is so large and it's hard to kind of film all in one area. So to start off with, I'm going to show you the tracks. Now these are the individual tracks that go on the side, the spare tracks, and they've got the little brackets on there, which you see we've painted dark yellow and then chipped up on there, and then just gave the track a general overall kind of a dirty tarnished look, as if it's been out in the elements for a while. Now the first step in this process is you're going to take your regular track, and we've sprayed it just a NATO black, and that's its base coat. These tracks come dark yellow just like the rest of the kit, so the NATO black goes on there. Then after that we spray it with the brown chipping mixture that I have, and that is 70% NATO brown, 25% NATO black, and then 5% red. And hopefully on camera you can see the variation in tone. It already has a nice natural tone to it. So after you have this portion right here, let's move on to putting some pigments and some washes onto it. I'm going to use a little light rust on it, and we're going to put just some rust just in some certain areas and kind of streak it in areas. We don't want it too heavy. Actually, this is the top. We should be streaking it from this side down. And also I like to put a little bit up on these top areas where water could accumulate a little bit more rather than streaking down the side. And let that dry for a little while. We'll come back to the next step. Now that we've let that dry, we're going to put a couple different pigments on this. Starting off with, this is Vallejo's Light Sienna pigment. We're just going to put a liberal coat of that on. Then taking a little bit of their old rust, and you can vary these colors of course any way you want on it. We're just going to put a little bit of it in certain areas, not completely over it. And finally, a little touch of European earth. And then just taking some enamel thinner, just drop that into place. And the enamel thinner will help to act as a binder to help it hold to it. Now we're going to let that dry for a little while and come back and I'll show you the next step. Now that the stuff has had a little chance to set up a little bit, before it's totally dry, you want to put a few little streaks and remove a little bit of the excess so it's not super heavy. And at this point we can take even a little bit more of our light sienna and just kind of tap it into some just random areas, just so you get nice color variation on it. Now I'm going to let that fully dry now, and I'll come back and let you see what it looks like and how different it looks after it dries. Okay, now that it's dried completely, it's obviously way too uniform. So taking a soft brush dry, you can start knocking off some of the excess. And then that is totally up to you how you want to do that. Then after you've done that, we've mixed up a little track wash with a little extra thinner in it, and we want to highlight some of these panels again. So just taking a little bit of the thin down, just touching it inside most of the crack in there. And it will dry much lighter than what it is right here. In fact, these are ones that I just did a little while ago. You actually need a tiny bit more inside. And lastly, before it completely dries too, we're going to take our toothbrush that's dipped in that track wash, and we're just going to put some specks on it. This is the messy part, unfortunately. It gets everywhere, but just a little bit, and it'll create a nice staining effect all over the piece once it dries. And the final little thing you might want to do is I'm just taking a little bit of light rust again, and just around some of the bolt heads, as well as some of the guide horns, just putting a little bit of, it's just very slight, but once it dries it should show up a little bit better, but just to give it a little bit more tone variation. And here we go. Here's our final reveal of all the individual tracks all weathered up. Okay, what I've done on all the road wheels is I first have sprayed all the road wheels black, and then we did a highlight coat of white for all the areas that would have a little bit of a more faded look. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to spray them with our base color, which in this case is going to be the dark yellow. And we don't want to put a super heavy coat on because you want to see some shadowing effect still show through on the road wheels. Okay, I've got all of the road wheels painted, and I've taken all of the rubber and snapped it into place on all of the road wheels. You'll also have noticed too that I've painted them in 3 different colors. I've seen some of the ones that have the entire road wheel painted into the German tricolor, so I've gone ahead and done that. Now what we're going to do is, now that we have them all painted, we're going to weather them up. And I've done a couple of prototypes here to show you, and that's what we're going to go for, is that really beat up worn look, as well as like on the green and as it looks on the brown as well. And as you can see on the yellow, we've got a couple different variations of, you know, rust and chips and cracks, things like that. You can also see that the inner road wheels have a little less rubber on it, so it's more of a rim around the outside, which we will put some metallic finish around here, because the way the Jagdpanther and Panther are, the guide horn of the track rubs up against this and chips this up quite a bit. So I'll also show you putting a little bit of like a metallic finish on the outside of that. So let me show you how I take this and turn it into this. Okay, now that we have the paint is dried on that, I should also point out too, these entire road wheels have been sprayed with Tamiya's TS80, their flat clear lacquer, and that is going to seal in all of our acrylic paint. So now I'm using a little enamel thinner, and we're just going to wet this whole area in through here, even the rubber itself. And once that gets wet, we're going to use a little bit of these streaking effects. This is streaking rust, this is streaking grime, and this is just a light rust. And I'm going to start off with the light rust, and just putting a little bit around a few of the bolt heads, and even kind of just blotting it a little bit around some of the areas that have bigger scratches on them. And then we can use a little bit of our the grime. And you can put it on a little bit thicker in some areas, because we're going to blend all this together. once we get a little bit of this on. And finally, a little bit of the streaking rust, which is kind of like an in-between color. And then we can kind of start to clean it up a little bit with our a brush. Now this brush is dry now. There's no more thinner. We're just relying on the thinner that we put on earlier. And start working it in. Okay, now, and before the thinner has a chance to dry completely, you can actually, taking a little bit more thinner, brush it around the rubber part of the wheel. Get that nice and wet. And then we're going to use a little bit of the Vallejo pigments. I'm going to start off with mainly light sienna. And we're going to put light sienna, pushing it into all the little parts of the rubber. And also putting a little bit inside the hub itself, kind of forcing it into all the little areas where the bolts are. Now I know it looks real messy right now, but you'll be really surprised after this dries, then the last little step you take. So you'll get something that looks like this, and just no matter how it looks, just walk away and let it dry for a little while. And once it dries, you'll get something that looks more like this. And then you want to use a big, fat, wide brush and just kind of polish out any of the excess. And you can see how you start to see there's still a film of dirt and dust around on the rubber. Also, there's a buildup all around all the little nuts and bolts inside there. I'm going to get extremely close. And you can see how that's starting to look really good, really worn and weathered. You can also add a little bit of different variations in color too. I'm also going to add a little bit of European earth as well as a touch of old rust. Doing the exact same thing that I did on the other one. We're just going to get a little different variation in color. While I'm letting the yellow wheels dry, we're going to show you too, for the dark green and the brown, it's the exact same process. The rust and streaking grime doesn't show up as much on it, but the dirt effect will. And here is where you can use a little bit of the rust pigment, kind of pushed into all these little areas. It won't necessarily look like rust, it'll just look like a redder type of earth. But once you blend it with the light sienna, you'll see what I'm talking about. So we'll let that dry and I'll come back and show you what all of them look like. Now here is that road wheel with a lot of heavy of the other colors on it. And give it a quick little dust off. And you can see how it leaves behind just dirt and grime in all the right areas. And that goes true for the green colors as well, or the brown as well. And finally, the last little thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a touch of some track wash, which is just a really dark brown wash, and thin it down a little bit more than normal. And we're just going to put a few little kind of like greasy stains. And this will dry a lot more subtle than even it is right now, but it'll make some of these other pieces just pop out a little bit. And you don't have to do all of it, but I'm going to do mainly just around the center hubs of these. And here's our completed pile of road wheels, all weathered up and ready to get put on the vehicle. This is an extreme close-up in natural sunlight of what the weathering looks like on the road wheels. Now we're going to paint the entire model with our NATO black, and that is going to be our shadow coat. And as you can see, like I told you earlier, we primed all of the metal parts just so the paint will stick to them a little better. I've completed the shadow coat and the highlight coat. Just so most people are going to probably ask, it did take almost a half a bottle of black, of the bigger bottles from Tamiya, to coat the entire model. Not as much white, obviously, because we're just filling in some of the areas on it. But now we're going to spray the model and give it its base coat of XF60, the dark yellow, German dark yellow. Okay, here we go. Here is our finished base coat. Now, the base coat is the dark yellow, and you can see how we did the just kind of a misting coat on it. We didn't go super heavy. You can still see a lot of the dark highlights or shadows coming through on it, as well as some of the lighter areas in the middle from the white. Now, when we put the brown and the green on, that is going to cover up that tone variation on that area. But when you see the yellow area still pop through, you will see that tone variation, and it'll be a nice pleasing effect to the eye. Now, this did take a lot of paint, once again, about a half a bottle of the dark yellow, even though we were just misting it on. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do the camouflage with the green and the brown, and we'll show you what that looks like. Okay, I finished up the green and the red-brown camouflage pattern on it. I've also attached now the wheels, as well as, hopefully you can see, I put one little small layer of thick mud up on the inside of the wheel well. Now this is just to give it some texture dimension to it once we put our pastels and stuff on it. It's mostly going to be hidden by the tracks, but you will be able to see a little bit of it. Now that we have all of that, and we've also clear coated the entire model with Tamiya's TS80 flat clear. So that sealed our entire paint job in. So now we're going to attach the decals before we're going to do any more weathering on it. And I'm going to use a little bit of Tamiya's Mark Fit Strong. Put a little coat down. And then place the decal in place here. Put a coat on top of it, and we're just going to let it dry there for about 3 or 4 minutes, and come back and hit it with a cotton swab, and that'll help burnish it down into it, obviously after we get it straight. Another thing I want to show you guys is this very front panel. Now this hasn't been glued down, that's why there's a gap right there. But this very front panel has 4 little holes in it, and that comes from the transmission, the metal parts inside there that poke through there. What I've done is I've taken just a sheet of real thin styrene and cut it out to shape right here, and I forgot to tell you guys about this before I started painting it, and I glued it over those holes so we have a realistic front end on it. Now I'm going to start the process of all the tool painting and some of the accessories. We also have glued together the tow hooks, as well as I also have the track pulled cable as well that we're going to paint up. And I'm also going to finish painting up the tracks now. We're going to put our coats of first the black and then the chipping color on it. Then we'll seal the entire tracks with dull coat, and then we can start weathering on all these pieces. I'm in the process now of painting up all of the tools and putting a wood look on all the handles. I just finished up the jacking block here, and I'm going to show you putting this on. So the first thing we're doing is we're using desert yellow as our base wood coat. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint up all the tools right now with that. And this is one time you really don't really care about brush strokes. In fact, brush strokes kind of help a little bit with this because we want a little bit of a wood grain going on. So you don't need to put any of the paint retarder in this. Just let the brush strokes show through. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish up painting all of these with the dark yellow and come back and show you the next step. Okay, now that the brown is dried, we're going to use our Tamiya brown panel liner, the accent color, and giving it a good shake. We're just going to put a coat of that on, dragging it down the length of the handle. Now you're going to want to let that set up just for a few minutes, not fully dry, and I'll show you the next step after it sets up for a few minutes. Next, you want to take, I'm using just a darker enamel wash, the streaking grime, and just putting some real thin lines in it. And before you let those dry, I'm going to use my finger and just streak those out, blend those in. Okay, I've painted the straps now and also chipped those up a little bit. Those would have been body color. Now we're just taking a foam rubber brush, dipped slightly into our metal powder. I'm just going to put a little bit of an edge on some of this stuff. And then of course you can always wipe it down to dull down the appearance on it. And blend that in for a little while. And here is our axe completed, ready to go on the vehicle. Okay, now we're going to add some chips first and then some scratches. We're going to use just our foam, piece of torn off foam dipped in our chipping color and blotted mostly out on a paper towel, and just going to go around the edges of the whole vehicle and put a few little chips and scratches. And you can see I've started doing it down here a little bit already. Okay, now that we've got the chipping the way we want, we're going to put a coat of enamel thinner on here. Get the surface nice and wet. And now we're going to start to use some of our streaking effects, starting off with this right here is a dark streaking rust, and it doesn't, I know it's called streaking rust, but to me it appears more like dirt and stuff when it builds on there. So we're not totally rusting up this vehicle ridiculously. And we're also going to use a little streaking grime kind of blended next to it. And then using our brush, we're just going to start to pull and you want to keep cleaning your brush as you go. And then you can also use a Q-tip cotton swab, take some of the excess out. And just keep blending that through. And this will take a little bit of time, obviously, because you want to get it to the way that you want it to look. So I'm going to play around with this for a little while longer, and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like. So after probably about 10 minutes of playing around with it, I think I've got it to a point that I'm happy with it. I like these longer streaks of the darker area right here. Looks kind of like a dirt and stuff that would have just washed down. And it's also going to be a little heavier around here because this is where that other tow cable is going to go for the tracks. Now that that thick mud is dried up inside there, we're going to put some of our pigments in it to kind of give it more of a dried out, dirty look rather than muddy look. So we're just going to use some of our light sienna and start packing that in to start. We're also going to use a little bit of the European earth as well as some other colors that we might decide on. The nice thing about that mud effect though is it gives it a texture, especially in this scale. You wouldn't want it to be too small. And we can use a little bit of our enamel thinner too to help adhere it. So I'm going to finish up doing up the inside of in here, and I'll come back and I'll show you what it looks like. Also, while we're waiting for that to dry, because the drive sprocket is really metal, we're taking our real soft sanding block and just at an angle hitting the edges of the drive teeth. And that's giving them a nice metallic effect. And what we'll do is we'll put a little bit of like a tarnish color on there so it's not so bright. Well, here we go. Here is our finished product, and I'll kind of go over a few other things with you guys just to kind of show you what I went through. First and foremost, I'll give you like a little 360 of the whole vehicle. And then I can kind of show you guys what I've done. Now, one thing obviously is I went ahead and weathered all of the tracks, and I weathered them using the exact same process that I did up here, only with a little bit more weathering on it, as well as a little metal on the fingertip rubbing on the tops of the ice cleats right there, just to kind of highlight them. I didn't show that again because I figured it was exactly the same way. Now, I put this one tow cable on right here, and honestly, I'm not very happy with it, and I am going to take it off. The thread that or the string that they gave you is very hairy, and it doesn't look like the tow cable. I just threw it in place there for right now, just to show you guys. I plan on getting some nice wire, some turned wire like that, and cutting them back out again and redoing all of that. But just to show it in place right there, I thought it looked like it, show you guys how it looks. As you can see, also we went ahead and weathered up all of the mufflers here. These are actually the flame dampeners on the back here. We rusted those up a little bit, but you can still see a little bit of the dark yellow color underneath there. I also wanted to give you a little bit of a lower view showing how we did some of the mud splatters, and all of this was just taking a little bit of our streaking grime and just using the toothbrush and just flicking up a little bit, and we got these nice splash marks up in here as well as up on the other side here, and a little bit even popped up even up on the mufflers, which I thought turned out pretty well. Now, I still do have a seam right here, and that is for one reason, is that I have not glued this top on. This top is still completely removable, and the reason I did that was because I'm honestly thinking I might actually see if I can go ahead and get the RC parts for this down the road and maybe RC it up. I'm not positive about it, but I didn't want to glue it down and then decide later, and then I'm having to cut up parts and things like that. So hopefully you can see too up inside the cavity in here, all of the mud and grime and dirt and stuff that we put up inside there as well. So, weathering on this scale was probably the most fun that I've had of building of any other kit, including all the 35th scale stuff. Doing it on such a large scale was a lot of fun, and now it did take an awful lot of weathering pigments and washes and paint, of course, and dull coat. I actually went through a can and a half of dull coat, just sealing in the different paint jobs and things like that, but definitely well worth it. I think the thing looks really, really good and is going to be quite impressive as a display piece on my front counter. So I want to thank you guys as always for watching. I appreciate it, and please stay tuned because we have many more videos coming.